yeah, my number one advice for musicians working actually in any theater context, but particularly with puppeteers, is all of that amazing training that you have on a particular style or a particular instrument, keep it, but don't rely on it. Be prepared to do all kinds of crazy stuff, because as musicians, we, like actors, can try on different voices and try on different characters. It's just like acting. It's just with a musical language instead of with words.
Welcome back to Puppeteers. We're your hosts, Adam Krutinger
and Cameron Garrity.
And today we have Melissa and Matt Dunphy on the show. Welcome to the show, guys.
Hi!
Hello. Good to talk to you guys again.
Dr. Dunphy.
Yeah.
Well, Matt and Melissa, we've known them for quite a while now. Melissa is the director of music composition at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center, which is how we first met. She has her doctorate in music composition from the University of Pennsylvania, and is formerly an actor and music director at the Philadelphia Shakespeare Company. Matt is a musician in his own right. By day, he is a web developer and solutions engineer. He's been in many, many different bands, and together they are the power couple behind the Boghouse Podcast, the owner of the Hannah Callowhill Stage. They have a band, Up Your Cherry, and we're just so happy to have them here to talk about music in the puppetry world. So, Ben, thanks. Welcome to Puppeteers.
I'm so happy to be here. We're so this is a real honor because we sort of feel like we're puppet adjacent in a lot of ways, but I guess we've been doing this a long enough time now that it feels very much like we're part of the tribe, even though I tend not to wiggle dollies. I've done it.
No, and that's something that we've really wanted to start doing more with this show, is to talk to people who are kind of in that periphery, writers, musicians, other folks, because so much of the art form is about collaboration.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Usually when you meet a puppeteer, they're also a puppet builder. They're maybe also a writer. But there's a certain point where that skill set just can't extend that far. So we really wanted to help, have you guys come in and demystify the world of music and sound a little bit, and to share your experience.
Yeah, we are also sharing a cat who just popped up behind us and is hi, this is Moonlight. Moonlight,
She's recording not on camera.
We're recording a podcast. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I'm so happy to talk to the puppet tribe out there in puppet podcast land.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's just putting on a show, and there's so many elements to putting on a show, as far as lighting and sound and everything. So yeah, and especially what's great about you guys is having experience with puppeteers. So I'm sure there's different things in working with puppeteers than maybe working with bands or other things as well.
I think that there's like a lot of parallels for me as a classical musician. There are a ton of parallels between puppetry and music as disciplines. Music is also a discipline which requires collaboration in order to succeed. But also, you can start off, you can do a lot of music by yourself. So the same way with puppeteering, where you practice by yourself in a room, or you start building by yourself in a room, and then you're practicing your art by yourself in a room. But then at some point, to get the full experience and to really realize what you're trying to create, you have to go out there and you have to find other musicians or puppeteers, then you have to find other people who fit into, other slots of collaboration, lighting and sound engineering and, all of that stuff. And there's a ton of similarities between it's both introverted and extroverted at the same time. You know what I mean?
Well, even the idea of the puppet being an instrument, especially in talking with someone like Bart Rockaburton, who's dealt with puppeteers of all kinds. Totally. He says that he'd rather work with a puppeteer who was formerly a musician than formerly a dancer, because they know what it's like to channel a performance into that tool.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. I feel like, for something I've said since I started going to the Puppetry Conference, where you get to experience like so many different styles of puppetry, is that for me, the closest style of puppetry to playing a stringed instrument in a classical music context is marionettes, because there's an enormous learning curve. Like right at the beginning, you pick up a marionette and you feel like a complete idiot. You can't do anything. You've just watched, Philip come off stage doing this incredible marionette show, and he makes it look so easy. So then you pick up a marionette and then you realize like you can't even get it to stand up straight without you can't move it at all. You can't get it to walk, you can't get it to lift its arm, you can't do anything. And that's how it feels to pick up a violin for the first time if you've never done it before. It's the same thing. And then you have to practice exactly like a classical instrument, where you have to, do it for hours a day and keep doing it. And then, at some point it clicks and suddenly you can start making music or motions with the puppet that look natural, that sound like music. But then it's
scales and chords and really putting those movements together and
exactly
before it starts making sense.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. And then other forms of puppetry, I think, are sort of more similar to pop styles or jazz styles or, that kind of thing. I think there's so many parallels. Although I would have thought that dancers would have had a similar kind of work experience or work ethic. It's interesting that Bart is focused on the instrument as object.
And I don't, he certainly wasn't slating dancers.
Sure.
It was definitely just that they're so used to using their whole body that
sure.
to concentrate it into one thing, that's a bit of a learning curve. It's a different part, in the same way that an actor would have difficulty doing puppetry because they're used to using their body,
their face, and yeah.
Exactly. So when did puppetry kind of happen for you guys? Because I know you've been associated with the O'Neill for a while, but I don't know that that's when it started.
I'm sure it wasn't something you were seeking out necessarily.
Well, I mean, it's funny. I started in theater, of course, and I was a composer for theater, and that's how I got into sort of hardcore composition study. I wrote some music for Harrisburg Shakespeare Festival's production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. And it was an emergency job. I was in the production as Cobweb the Fairy, and the music director dropped out at the last minute. He was going through a tough time, and the director came to me and said, "You're a musician. I really need a whole bunch of songs. It's midsummer. We don't have any songs. We need the songs." And I said, "Well, I'll try." And when I was doing it, I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do with the rest of my life. So I started my bachelor degree at Westchester University, just outside of Philadelphia. And while I was there, as a student, you're always looking for programs to do in the summer and residencies and, places to learn outside of the usual academy. And I stumbled across this listing for music participants at the National Puppetry Conference at the Eugene O'Neill Theater Center. And I had never worked seriously with puppets before, but to me, it's just another form of theater. And I was interested in it initially, even though I had never worked with puppets before. I was interested in it because to me, puppetry is just another form of theater. And writing music for puppets, I figured would not be too dissimilar from the experience I had already had working for theater. So that was in 2009. Oh my God,
that was Philadelphia at that point. Yeah.
It was 10 years ago. And I just finished my undergraduate degree. I was an older undergrad, so I was 29 years old. And I came up to the National Puppetry Conference as a music participant, and it changed my life. It changed my life. I had never had an experience like this before. I got very lucky as well. The other music participant that year was Brad Kemp, who is an incredible New York-based bassist and composer, and I think he works for Google now as well.
That's
so
right.
He's multi-talented, incredibly smart dude. And he and I got on like a house on fire, and really, we were the first ever music participants at the Puppetry Conference to both come back the next year. because we had such a good time. I know usually it's like you come once and you get your experience and you leave. Yeah, and we were like, we're coming back. We're building on this. We need even more of this, both of us. So we came back the next year, and had an even more amazing time. And the following year, Matt and I were on a road trip around the country, so we had to miss the conference. But that's the year that Brad Kemp decided that, we were going to take over the music stream completely. Like, Larry Siegel, who was running the stream, he moved on, and we were like, all right, it's ours. We're breathing our, we love this life into it. And then but shortly after, Brad had a baby. And babies are amazing, but for anyone who has a baby, they take up a lot of time and energy, and it can be difficult to leave your spouse and baby for an entire 8 days or more in the middle of the summer. So Brad said, Melissa, will you be the spearhead for the puppetry, the music composition stream at the Puppetry Conference? And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, of course. And so I took it over, and I've been the head of it ever since. And about 2 years into taking it over, Matt?
Yeah, I guess I should introduce myself.
Yeah, I mean, well, you've been introduced, but you should start talking about what your experience, because you would come up, right?
It's true. I had come up for the end of each of the weeks that the National Puppetry Conference takes place in. Go English. There's the public performance, and I would come up so that I could help not only load the car, but see all the shows. And it was amazing, especially coming from the perspective of somebody who didn't see the whole week or week plus in some cases, and just seeing the end result was fantastic. And then one year, several years into Melissa's tenure there, I was having an incredibly difficult, just a challenging year at work. And I was like, it'd be great if I just went up for the whole week and just enjoyed the scenery, right? It's a beautiful environment. So we asked if I could tag along.
Matt made this very impassioned plea. He was like, Melissa, do you think you could ask Pam if I could just come along for the whole week? I'll pay for my food. I'll do what, I won't get in the way. I could help things.
There's no extra bedding.
Right. We could sleep in a twin bed together. We've done that before. So it was you don't even have to give us a big bed. We'll just sleep in the same twin together and we'll just hang out. And so I sent this letter to Pam, and I was so careful because I didn't know if I was, asking too much. And Pam was just like, of course, bring Matt up. We love Matt, and she's like, you know what? We'll make him your assistant for the week. So for 1 week out of each year, Matt is not just my assistant in spirit.
Well, that was the thing, is it was actually very difficult for me to not do stuff, because getting there and being surrounded by these just incredible people who are just from 7 a.m. till who knows what hour at night, and it depends. Just creating and thinking and working together all the time, and having a bit of that background myself. When you're surrounded by that, it's hard to just relax. So as a vacation, it turned out to be a terrible idea, but
oh yeah.
And I also have to say,
it became
yeah. Go ahead.
Well, it became a really interesting opportunity to go from helping out to Melissa starts tasking me with just creating as well, because people get really excited that there are live musicians to help out with things. It becomes transformative.
I always tell people the music stream at the O'Neill is probably the busiest and occasionally the most stressed out stream. And they're all stressful in their own way. We talk about at the conference, Tearful Tuesday and Weepy Wednesday. And these are not criticisms of the conference. We're all having an amazing time. It's just so emotional because we're all trying to create these shows from scratch. But whereas most of the puppeteering participants have two things that they're working on, the main show that they're doing in their mainstream and maybe a participant project. the musicians can have up to 8 or 9 shows each that we're creating music for. So it's, holding all of those shows in your head all at once, it can get just overwhelming. So with an extra person in the stream, I would just be like, Matt, go do this, go do that. You know what? You're gonna take over this project now. This is gonna be your baby. Create some music for this.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you look at some of the older Henson stuff, and clearly into like Sesame Street, what I bring to the table, whereas Melissa has a very rich classical background and a choral background, I come from sort of punk rock and synthesizers, and there is some. I think a lot of that was built out of some of the stuff that I absorbed in my childhood. Or if you look at some of these clips from the 70s and 80s, it's all crazy synth music.
That's true. That's super true. And I also have to say, like, one of the things that Matt and I were freaking out about really early on, I wonder if he's going to listen to this, but like the first year I went to the puppetry conference, I remember getting, the information packet in the mail with all of the bios of all of the teachers and who all was going to be at the conference. And I remember just flipping out at Marty Robinson's bio, like flipping out, and then immediately, running to Matt and being like, okay, this guy, okay, first of all, he's Snuffleupagus, okay, and he's Telemonster. But wait, he also, created and operated the first Audrey 2 on Broadway. Okay, but wait, and this was the one that I knew was gonna like blow Matt's mind. I'm like, he did the animatronics for Leonardo in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. And like, I remember us both just being like,
this is crazy.
He created our childhoods. Like, Matt was a huge Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like, fan as a kid. And so both of us are just like, oh my God. And then I go to the conference and I'm, he's the nicest guy in the world. And you can kind of hear Snuffy in his voice. And but we're having conversations about like science fiction books we like. And, he's got no ego at all. He's just like the coolest person to work with.
He's on Sondheim somehow.
Yeah, it's just like, oh my God, these people. And then like every person that you meet there is like that. You don't know who they are necessarily. You don't know their face because that's how puppeteers are, right? It's like as you said, you put everything into the object. It's not about you necessarily, in a very sort of celebrity culture way. But then you look at their resume and you realize what an impact their work has had on you, and then you meet them and they're just like the most down-to-earth people in the entire world. It was, yeah. I remember that first year you came up as my assistant. At the end of the conference, we do this big kind of, everyone goes around and talks about what they got out of the conference and what was their favorite part of the conference. And to my surprise, my introvert husband puts his hand up like, I want to say something, which is not the usual Matt Dunphy MO. And he starts thanking everyone for allowing him to come up, and his voice starts cracking because he's on the verge. He was like on the verge of tears, and I'm like,
which, I mean, just to explain, I think we did mention I have that software engineer background, and if you've ever met developers, I think you understand.
You don't get emotional like that talking about a conference generally, but this is not like a usual conference, and puppeteers are not like usual conference participants. It's amazing how much you bond with everyone there and how easy it is to bond with other people in the puppet world. I guess we just, we fit somehow as well into that world. So
hardworking creative types.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, and then you get into that Quaker like compliment circle, and all emotions just like burst out, open floodgates.
I love that you describe it as a Quaker circle.
That's what when Robert Smythe would run those, he would always say like, I'm from a Quaker background, and we're gonna all just say what we like about things, and he would always say like in the Quaker tradition. So yeah, that's where that.
Yeah. You speak when the spirit moves you, otherwise you just sit there in silence.
Right.
Nice.
It's the nature of being on any of those kind of projects, being involved in a theater show or anything. You get a little bit of a showmance going on.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you spend that much time, intensively working together. And we were just talking with John Little, and he was like, yeah, because you're up 20 hours a day. Like, you sleep for 4 hours, and even if you finish at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, then you're up at the bar with Ronnie Burkett until 2:30.
Yeah. That's how cults work, right?
Your natural social defenses break down.
Right.
Like you just become vulnerable by the very nature of exhaustion.
Right. If they really wanted, you could pretty much come in there and put everyone in a cult if you loaded up the meals with just straight glucose and no protein.
Yeah.
Then it would be super easy by the end of the week to just convert the entire puppet camp into just a full-on cult, I think. Yeah, we would go out into upstate New York or something and set up a commune, and could be an interesting experiment.
Create our own Mormonism or something.
Yeah, exactly. Baptize ourselves.
That's why we have to keep it in the East Coast. It stays grounded. Cults are more fertile
you have to
as
go,
you
right,
go west.
Keep going west. And then it gets crazy. Oh dear. Okay.
Love those tangents. But so I mean, obviously puppetry marries itself so well with music, and sometimes we've all seen shows where there isn't any dialogue, and it's all just underscoring and things like that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that puppeteers always understand how music composition works. They understand that it goes well with puppetry, but they don't know how to do it. So what kind of challenges does that pose for you guys as you're creating music and score for a puppet work?
Do you want to talk first?
Yeah, it's funny. I think, at least in the environment that we've worked in, it hasn't been that challenging because I think the most challenging thing that does happen is when people ask us to perform a cover of other people's music. It's we can, and sometimes that fits, but nobody's here asking you to do a puppet show that somebody else did. Take the opportunity to do something that you can make yours as part of this. And that's, as challenges go, that's such a minor challenge. There's actually a real openness towards people feel like they're getting this gift, and they're just so excited.
Yeah, I feel like the cover thing comes from, puppeteers do so much of their work like classical musicians, alone in their room or their studio or wherever, their basement or wherever they're creating stuff. They might, they don't know about, issues of copyright, for instance. It's not something that puppeteers have to necessarily interface with right off the bat. Whereas if you're a musician, you don't get very far before you start realizing how big a deal copyright is, especially in the music world. But when you're working by yourself in your basement and you don't know that much about creating your own music, you're probably downloading stuff off YouTube and saying, I'm going to create a piece that looks like that goes with this. I'm going to use this sort of placeholder music. And they don't realize that.
I mean, it can work for a little while, but everybody's dream at some point, maybe not everybody's, but the idea is your show gets big. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You're going to start running into trouble if you're just playing, a CD backing track of somebody else's music.
Yeah, there's only so far you can really get with that.
Yeah.
But I imagine, though, it might still be, in a way, somewhat helpful information, whereas, hey, they say they want this Frank Sinatra song, but you're like, well, that kind of gives me an idea of where to kind of start with sound.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
People do that with movies, right? In the film world, you make a scratch track, and you'll see that all the time where, in the film, this film director put in all of these songs for this part of the film, but then they hire an actual composer who listens to the scratch tracks and then makes something custom that gives the same mood as the scratch track. So that can be pretty helpful.
Yeah.
But in general, working with puppeteers as a musician is such a joy, because when musicians work with other musicians, I don't know if it's just a culture in the classical music world anyway, but God, there's so much judgment. It's just like judgy McJudge. Like we all judge each other. Like our music exams in college are literally called juries. So if you didn't think you were being judged before, like go to your jury. Make sure you really get judged, you know. And we grow up in that culture oftentimes from when we were children, and it's difficult for me as a trained musician to listen to something that's in a context of classical music that's not, you know, technically perfect or something like that. Whereas when you're working with puppeteers, it's not about that at all. You know, it's more in that sort of experimental mode where you can create stuff the motto of the O'Neill is risk, fail, risk again, right? And it's like, you can take risks. It doesn't have to be technically perfect. You can, you know, just use your instincts to create some music. And I tell the musicians that come up, who often come from a classical tradition, I'm like, 99 times out of 100, you'll play something and in your head, you'll be critiquing it and going like, that note was a little out of tune and this wasn't exactly right. But the person you're making music for is like fainting on the floor with pleasure. like so happy to see how easy it can be to collaborate with a musician. So yeah, I always encourage puppeteers and really any theater people, but I think puppeteers in particular, when you're creating stuff, not in the conference where you have these ready-made musicians, but sort of in your hometowns or wherever, make friends with musicians, invite musicians around to see your stuff, see if there's opportunities to collaborate, you know.
Go out to shows. I've always enjoyed collaboration between different art forms. Melissa, as a composer, will generally hire some kind of visual artist to do a cover for a piece that she's composed. There's just a lot that brings out because of the spontaneity of two people who are unfamiliar with each other's disciplines. Sometimes you do get somebody asking for, you know, a particular thing, and then in the downtime you're noodling around on some other instrument, and they're like, "Wait, what?" And it totally changes the course of it. Sort of unlocks elements of their own piece that they maybe didn't know were there and actually enjoy better.
Sometimes puppeteers will be like, "I don't need any music," or you know, because they've been doing stuff without music for a really long time, and they're like, no, this doesn't need any music. I've been doing it for ages without music. And the amazing thing is when every time that's happened and I've said, look, give me like 5-10 minutes, let me give you a musician and see what happens, every single time they're like, holy, like, what? Like, okay, I thought I didn't need music, and now it turns out that I do. You know, it's, every single time.
I might compare it to, like, you know, watching like a horror movie or something. Because if you watch a section of a horror movie, like 90% of the suspense is from the sound. If you watch it on mute, you'll be like, okay, it's a door. Okay, it's a this, it's a that, like whatever. And then that music comes in, and it's like, it has you on the edge of your seat, and you're like, what's about to happen? A monster's about to come out. What's going on?
Are you into it with the Jaws thing?
Well, hit the Jaws thing. I was going to talk about scratch tracks.
So
go ahead.
John Williams, Jaws, Steven Spielberg, right? There is an amazing video you can find on YouTube. It's actually, the video is from when John Williams he was conducting an orchestra of his own film scores. But they did this amazing sort of A-B comparison just to show you what a film is without music and what it is with music. And I gotta say, when I watched this A-B comparison, my esteem for Steven Spielberg kind of went down a little bit because I realized like how much, so what it does is it shows you a section of Jaws without John Williams' soundtrack, and it was like seriously the most boring and confusing footage you've ever seen in your life. It's like a shot of the sea, a shot under the hold, you know, a shot of, you know, what's his name, the star of Jaws? What's his name?
Dreyfuss?
The shark.
Yes, Richard Dreyfuss. Like
the shark.
You didn't even see the shark from the shark, the puppet shock, right? It's puppetry. Oh my God. So yeah, it's like just these random shots, and there's like a close-up of Richard Dreyfuss's face, but he doesn't actually look like anything. Like he's just kind of neutrally staring out at the sea, and it's nothing. Like there's no plot. There's nothing. And then they do it again with John Williams conducting this live orchestra underneath it. And it is astonishing. It's like suddenly the whole thing makes sense. The shot of the sea with the, going underneath, you're like, oh my God, the shark's coming. And then every single part of it makes total sense. And what's astounding to me is, usually they make the film part first, and then the music gets added into the film in post, right? So Spielberg made that confusing, boring cut of Jaws. Like, he made that cut, and then...
He decided on that.
Right.
He's like, this is great!
This is how I made a film, guys! I made a film! Look at my film! And then gave it to John Williams, and John Williams was like, okay, hold up.
He earned his paycheck for sure, John Williams.
Right! I'm like, he's basically like... you know what? I got this. And then he just made the whole film make sense with music. And that's so astonishing to me.
Yeah. Along those lines, really quickly, a similar sort of revelation for me was with David Fincher's movie, The Social Network. There's a great behind-the-scenes clip on the Blu-ray or whatever where they show that opening scene after this argument where...
the one in the bar with them, the two main... the main character... Zuckerberg and his girlfriend from BU or whatever.
Yeah, and they have this argument, and then he walks home to campus, and in the original scratch track, it's like this jaunty Elvis Costello track. So it's like this totally like college campus feeling movie, and then they play it with the Trent Reznor piano theme that has become very well known since, and it completely changes the mood. Mm-hmm. Here's this guy who's just totally isolated. It's I think that's another example of how you think the movie should go, and then you bring a musician in, and it unlocks this whole new thing. And it's really wild to partake in that.
There are a lot of things like that, like when people do those recutting movies as horror trailers and things.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, and it's like, yeah, you can turn anything into anything, but so much of that is music. My other favorite example is There Will Be Blood, that film with Johnny Greenwood doing the very avant-garde string soundtrack. And there's this amazing scene in the middle, and I remember having this thought like very vividly while I was watching this. There's this montage in the middle where they're sort of building oil rigs, and there's like, the main character has a little boy that he's adopted by killing the dad or something. It's like
Spoilers.
Very dark. Anyway, so it's this sort of montage that is in another context. If you put like jaunty Americana fiddle music underneath it, it would be this like, oh, we're building the West, everything is great. Look, he's got his cute little kid with him, that he's an oil man and he's living the American dream. And instead, there is the most foreboding, unsettling, like scratchy strings, building suspense. And it's completely juxtaposed with what's going on the screen. But it just puts it into this incredibly deep space where your brain is trying to reconcile the two and getting this incredible sense of dread out of the difference between these two things. So yeah, these are the sorts of things that I love that music can do with a visual art form like puppetry. You could have the cutest puppets in the entire world, and then you put something under it that makes it not cute anymore, and like what that does to the storyline. And suddenly you can tell stories that are very, dark with extremely cute visuals, and nobody is sort of like, oh, that's weird. No, it works because of the sound.
Right.
Yeah. Well, one thing else that I think you guys do a lot too. I remember seeing Brad Kemp do a demonstration. It's not so much even just music as much as it is sounds and inventing sounds. Because I remember even watching a behind the scenes thing for was it The Dark Knight, and the guy was using like razor blades on string instruments to get those kind of really bizarre sounds.
Yeah.
A part of what you guys do, which I think also works really well with puppetry as well, kind of creating new atmospheric sounds and noises.
Yeah. What's the name of that crazy instrument, the horror instrument? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't remember the name of it. That was for a different movie. That's for The Witch.
Was it for The Witch?
Yeah.
It's called like the it's got a name like the Horrornator or the something. Anyway, yeah, people have been like creating instruments to make like interesting sound effects and sound design. It's not even sound effects, it's sound design in particular. Yeah.
That's definitely where I tend to that's my weird flex.
So for people out there, just I realize that a lot of non-musicians don't know what the word timbre means in sort of the music context. So timbre, it's a French word. It looks like timbre, but it's pronounced timbre. I hate French. Anyway, it's a word that means how things sound. So in music, there are all these elements. Melody, of course, everyone understands what that is. Harmony, rhythm. And the fourth one, which people outside of music often don't kind of think about, is timbre, which is, in a very simple way, it's like the difference between a violin and a clarinet, you know? So timbre is like instrumentation. But in the 20th century, computers are invented and electronic music instruments are invented, and timbre suddenly blooms as this really interesting, limitless area of exploration. And the difference between Matt and I think, in a musical context is I'm very focused on melody and harmony and rhythm. That's my training. That's, you know, where my brain gets its rocks off. And Matt is super into timbre.
Yeah, I remember doing a piece with, I'm blanking on his name, and that's okay, but I came in with this little tiny Korg synthesizer. Like, it doesn't even really have a keyboard. It just, like, you can make weird noises with it. And this is something I'm sure we'll talk about more in terms of having a live musician performing with puppeteers, is you can react in real time as the show evolves. And so watching what's going on in the stage, and instead of having, you know, a motif that I'm repeating, I'm sculpting sound in real time to really help guide what I'm seeing on the stage and help set the mood in ways that were difficult without like an orchestra.
Yeah. Yeah, suddenly you don't need a whole orchestra. Suddenly a dude with a 2-inch by 4-inch box can do it.
Which I deliberately chose in that case, knowing that this thing was, you know, you could get it for like $50 online. The idea being trying to help this idea of being self-sufficient, you know, not needing fancy things, making do with using things in ways they're not intended to be. Mm-hmm. That informs a lot of my background when it comes to music and sound design, and I think that is a direct parallel to puppetry.
Well, and if you could save yourself from having to, set up sound cues and stuff with someone in a control room or whatever, because that leads to its own kind of problems of things not working or.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I love working with acoustic instruments particularly. I mean, electronic instruments are great as well, but like if you can get away from just pre-recorded tracks,
right?
When working with musicians, I mean, it's harder to take on the road. So there are practical concerns as well, because of course, that I think the main reason that puppeteers or any theater production uses pre-recorded tracks is you don't have to pay a musician to be live on stage. It really cuts down on things. But the experience of working with a live musician, for me, it's like, that's the goal. That's the ideal. If you can find the budget or the time or whatever you need to bring a live musician on stage with you, yeah, it's like super fun. And acoustic instruments is great because they don't need electricity. You can play in the dark. You You can experiment with stuff. You can take it out on the road. You can play in open air spaces. You can do all kinds of cool things.
Something that I was thinking about when you were talking about working with artists and creating like album art and stuff. I'm a huge fan of synesthesia, like that notion. Like I'm totally jazzed by it. And as a graphic designer, that's something I'm always thinking about is like, okay, what does your mission statement for your company or whatever, what does that look like from a visual standpoint? And I wonder for you guys in creating music and sound for puppet shows, how much does the look of a puppet kind of feed you guys, and the look of this puppet sounds like that?
And I jump off that a little bit more too, and that must also be a fun exercise for you guys versus like if you worked at a regular theater conference, and in the most part it's people for the most part playing other people, but in puppetry again you could be, it's another whole world that you're looking at potentially. It's very alien. It's very different. It might be inspiring in a different way to create sounds and music that you may not have in a regular theater conference.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. This is one of the reasons why I feel like at the Puppetry Conference in particular, we create more experimental music than we would in our normal practice, because that's the thing. It's like, yeah, puppetry, although it's a theater art form, it lends itself so much more easily to that kind of experimentation where things are, not as figural and literal as they usually are in theater. They don't even have to be strictly narrative. And how often do you find like non-narrative stuff in regular theater? Never, because we're obsessed with words and narrative,
and it's all metaphor at that point.
Right. Yeah, you can do so much more with puppets, and music has the ability to really dive into that non-figurative stuff as well. I mean, it's the same thing in music. It's like you can have melodies that have a beginning, middle, and end and take you on a journey and are really obvious, or you can have soundscapes, and you can have, sort of just experimental through composed things that jump from feel to feel or from section to section. There are so many different things that you can do. For me, yeah, I don't even know. No, I know. Okay. For me, the common language, the Rosetta Stone between the visual and the oral is emotion. That's, to me, and I know this isn't true for everyone, but, I often lead my improvisation sessions with puppeteers by saying, what emotion are you trying to get at in this part of the piece? Give me the emotional feeling, and you can be sort of as abstract as you want with that. The emotion here is purple, yeah. You can do that, but if I get sort of a sense of what the emotion is, then I can create music that fits that emotion. So that's kind of sometimes there isn't like a direct translation between the visual and the music without going through that emotional matrix first. Yeah, what about you?
It's interesting. I think a lot about how culture actually ties different themes in music to different emotions. I think we react to what we've grown up with.
There's a language that we learn.
There is a language that we learn, and there have been studies, and I mean, we do have the benefit of there often being a wide range of people from around the world who are at the Eugene O'Neill Center when we're doing the Puppetry Conference. But there's definitely language there, because I know that there are times when I'm tasked to create music for a show and they want it to be happy, and I'm bad at making happy music. Melissa, show me the major keys again.
You're like, what's happiness?
What is happy? What is your emotion, happiness?
I'm not creating when I'm happy. I do this as catharsis.
Just some background here. Matt and I met over a shared love of Nine Inch Nails. We've already mentioned Trent Reznor, so we may as well give this little background here. We're in addition to being puppet adjacent, before we were puppet adjacent, we were goth adjacent, I guess.
remember trying to convince my girlfriend at the time when I was 16 that I was not goth. And she's like, Matthew Dunphy, you wear boots, you dye your hair black, you listen to 9 Inch Nails.
You have an overcoat.
yeah.
And the eyeshadow was a dead giveaway.
I was like, but I'm not. I guess.
I mean, I definitely was for a period there. I went
Melissa's literally in a book called What is Goth by a guy who calls himself Voltaire.
Voltaire is like America's goth. He goes on Good Morning America whenever there's like a need for a goth spokesman to talk about goth issues, you know. And so
he did really neat stop motion animations for the Sci-Fi Channel when I was watching that as a teenager.
Yeah, he might count as puppeteer adjacent too. I wonder how many goths are puppet adjacent. There's a lot. Like there's a lot of weird crossover there. Anyway, yeah, I'm in his book as like the centerfold goth model. So I definitely was like goth. But we loved 9 Inch Nails, which is very dark music. So clearly our tastes run in that direction. Yeah, we're less goth now than we used to be.
So happiness is real easy for you guys then.
Yeah, you know, it's like I'm okay with happy music.
I'm bad at making happy sounding music.
Yeah,
the closest I could get is like dance music, and I generally don't make a lot of dance music.
But that's okay because, you know, there's plenty of shows that... And
also the important thing there, I think, is there is that challenge on our side as musicians as well.
Yeah.
You know, somebody will talk to Melissa and be like, I want Norwegian folk music. Melissa is neither folky nor Norwegian.
Yeah. But I'm like, okay, you know what?
Get out of our comfort zone.
Yeah, let me take a crash course in what that is. And, you know, actually I found out when I was researching that particular show, I'm like, oh, I know more about Norwegian folk music than I thought I did. And there's a lot of sort of parallels to other music that I've learned. And I know some Norwegian composers and I've played their music. So, okay, no, how much can I learn in a week to create what this person has tasked me with creating? And that can be a really awesome challenge, which, yeah, I feel, you know, in the puppetry world, it would be similar to saying, you know, you're, you know, a marionette expert, but let's throw you in tabletop for a second and see how well you do there. And you might feel completely uncomfortable because that's not what you're used to, but you find that there's a lot that's similar. Right? And you find that there are skills and your brain, the way your brain works is similar enough that you can translate your skills into that action. And then you get something out of that. And you also bring something new to the table, literally. Oh my God. Because of your experiences in a different side of that art form. Yeah.
And you start to redefine Norwegian folk music.
Yeah, sure. And then you just add to that canon, you know, it can be a lot of fun.
Now, on the flip side to that, though, I imagine there's times, and I think even when I've worked with you guys, I've done this before, where, well, let me start by saying it this way. When Adam sometimes gets commissions, there'll be people who ask him, oh, you know, we want this puppet, and, you know, it's got to be pink, and it's got to have an eye blink mech. And you then read the script, and you're like, no, it doesn't have, it should be blue. And, you know, don't worry about the iMac because, you know, it's completely superfluous.
Yeah.
Are there times when a puppeteer will say, I want Norwegian folk music, or, you know, they maybe overshare about what their preconceived notions about a project are, and then you have to like actually say, actually, you don't want that because this is a better way to approach things? Yeah.
Yes,
and what's the process of reconciling that? Maybe is the question.
There's two sides to that question because I feel like it depends. As a musician collaborator with theater, one of the things that I pride myself on is trying to really feed the vision of the director. So if the director has a really clear vision, it's not necessarily my job to be like, you're wrong, let me tell you what my vision is for your piece, kind of thing. You know, so let me try to support their vision as well as possible, while also, and I mean, this is maybe my improv background as well, yes and what if, can I try something else with you just to see what happens? Maybe they'll hate it. Maybe they'll be like, no, my vision is so strong. Exactly what I want for this piece is this, and anything else. Okay, you know what? That's you want to be a totalitarian about your piece, I am here to support your totalitarian vision in this little piece. But I feel like you have a lot to say about this from the software side of things, because it's like project management where so Matt does web design. Well, he works for an e-commerce company that creates websites, and sometimes you'll get clients, right?
I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
You've got to know and them.
Yeah.
No, let me just pop in one thing too. It's like you're professionals in your field, and that's part of why you're coming to these people for that advice.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
you take that advice. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
This little clip is going on Matt's homepage on his website.
This.
No, I've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah.
I don't know that while that's true in my professional capacity, even within that, the best way I've found to bring somebody around to that idea is to let them discover it for themselves. When we're working with puppeteers, we'll bring a whole host of instruments, and sometimes people get drawn to the weird ones because it's the only time they've seen a theremin. And like, I would love to have a theremin, which, for those not aware, is this instrument that you don't even touch. It's one of the oldest electronic music instruments. You've got 2 antennae, and it's reminiscent of the weird space sound you hear in... Oh, you just broke my train of thought. It was the Beach Boys song. Yeah, Good Vibrations. There we go.
Okay.
And they look fun. They're incredibly hard to play.
To play a melody. You can make all kinds of UFO sound effects with them super easy.
It reminds me of the love lamp thing from Anchorman. It's like, I love lamp. Do you love lamp, or are you just looking at it and saying that you love it? Do you really want the instrument? You think it's interesting and it's new to you, and that's why you want it.
I love theremin!
What I tend to do is I kind of run parallel tracks personally. I'm like, all right, we'll try this out, but I have something in the back of my mind as a plan B. Like, because eventually I see what's going on, and I have a good idea of what I think will work well with that. I think it's good for you to have the opportunity to try new things, and if it works, that's fantastic, because then that's breaking my expectations. But also, I kind of know what I'm talking about, and
every now and again we get proven wrong. You know, every now and again you're like, I kind of thought
proven
this,
wrong a lot.
but,
yeah, actually.
You know, but you know, the person we're working with will be like, no, I really want this, and you'll be like, oh, that wasn't my first thought, but let me try it out, and then you try it, and you're like, oh, yeah, okay, I get it, you know, and you have to really commit. I find that in the instances where that's not true, it's actually, and the beauty of being at a conference like that is that, you know, you can pull other people in the room who have a theater background, who know about, you know, what works and doesn't work, and A/B test stuff in the room and have them, you know, give the person third-party, unbiased, uninvested feedback on what they thought worked and what didn't work. And that's sort of a big part of what the conference is about, is getting this feedback from people who've been in the industry for longer than we've been alive. You know? So that can be sort of gratifying too, is, you know, showing those different sides of things.
And you gain that kind of confidence of making those decisions the more you do it as well. Because I remember, like, in the beginning, I'd say, hey, you might want to do this, and they're like, no, I really want to do it. And then after the project, they're like, you know what, I probably should have listened to you.
Yeah, sure.
After hearing that many times, you just become more confident. Like trust me, bud, I've done this many times, and I've seen this happen a bunch of times. We don't want to have to redo this.
Right, absolutely.
Like I said before, trust us. We know what we're doing.
Yeah. It can also be, you know, sort of fun to go somewhere where to take an idea that I didn't think would work on first hearing it and making it work.
Yeah.
And part of that intuition too is also from just doing it, because you know, I think again, you know, like, that's definitely not going to work.
Right.
And then you still have that other feeling like, maybe it could, you know?
Right.
Like,
what if I was
I
doing
can stretch
it awesome?
myself. If you have that tinkling feeling that you know you can stretch yourself, you know, maybe you should consider it then. But again, sometimes you just got to put your foot down too. It's like,
yeah. I mean, I feel like that's so much of theater in general, because theater is so many different aspects that come together. You know, really good actors can take a script that is frankly trash and turn it into gold. You know what I mean? And or you can get a script that's amazing, but in the hands of the wrong actor, it doesn't work at all. You know, there's so many scripts I've seen that are like that. Directors also, you know, can take a script that doesn't really work, but then add all these other elements, you know, whether it's movement or lights or pacing or whatever it happens to be, and turn a script that isn't, you know, totally amazing on its own into theater that everyone wants to see.
One of my theater professors once said, he's like, would you pay to listen to someone read from the phone book? I'm like, no, not at all. What about Robin Williams? It's like, oh yeah, I probably would.
Right.
I listened to him read the phone book.
Like, yeah, Christopher Walken, problematic, but I mean, you know, you would, you'd be like, yeah, no, I'd see that. I'd see that.
Maybe a couple pages.
Right, absolutely.
Something that had me thinking about, because we were talking about, you know, wanting to collaborate and working back and forth with people, and something that Adam and I end up doing a lot when we're working with the client. You know, you'll either send sketches and versions of, you know, instead of making a whole puppet and then finding out that it's wrong. I do lots of storyboards for clients too, and that's easier than saying, you know, oh, why don't we change this camera angle? And it's all just stuff done on index cards. Obviously saves you time and money. Is there a way that if a puppeteer is wanting to collaborate with a musician, that they could ask for, I don't know if it would be a scratch track or a low cost, fast way for a musician that's relatively light lifting before you get to that process of committing to something really well produced and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I definitely think there are ways of doing that. For me, something that I do, so if I'm scoring out a melody or, you know, a whole track from scratch, I use a program called Sibelius, which is scoring software. There are a couple of different there are a couple of different brands of scoring software. Sibelius, Finale, Dorico is a new one that's getting a lot of attention recently. You put the notes down on what looks like manuscript, sheet music. So it's kind of like a word processor, but for sheet music. And then you hit play and MIDI comes out that's, you know, sounds like the instruments that you put on the paper. And it used to be like 20 years ago, MIDI was garbage. MIDI instruments sounded like, you know, you wanted to rip your ears off and run away screaming. Like, that's not, it's like uncanny valley human
Sega
voice.
Genesis music.
Sega Genesis.
I think we've still done a couple commercials recently that have had that kind of music.
Yeah, we have.
But I will say MIDI instruments, for all of my aversion to them, have improved so much in the last 20 years that I'm now seeing them in very professional contexts. But it's like the easiest thing in the world to just sort of put notes on the page and then get a virtual instrument to play them back. So for me, creating scratch tracks, and I do this for, you know, say a choir commissions me to write a piece of music, I will often, when I've done my sort of first draft of it, send them the sheet music, but also because it's easier, send them the MIDI scratch track as well, so they can get a sense of what it sounds like. And I'll put, you know, on my email when I'm sending this, I'll be like, please excuse the MIDI voices because they're like, oh, you know, just like the worst stuff. But everybody is used to, you know, they know that that's not what human voices sound like. But yeah, so I feel like you can do that to some extent with theater shows as well. But for me, and I do a lot of theater composition and sound design here in Philadelphia, I need to see the show up on its feet before I know exactly how my music is going to fit in. And I'm lucky, you know, I can compose very quickly when called upon. The O'Neill has given me so much experience in composing like an entire show in an hour, you know. and you know, 8 entire shows in a day, that kind of thing. So for me, it's like I can do this preparation, I can create scratch tracks, I can create sort of some initial material, but it's not until I get into what in a theater world would be sort of, you know, tech or late rehearsal periods that I'm like, okay, this is how this is going to fit together, and put all the building blocks that I've made together and show you the shape of it. And it's funny because it's like some theater directors totally get that, and they've probably worked with me before and they trust me, and other theater directors start getting really freaked out because they're so used to pre-recorded tracks being like in the bag by halfway through the process, and they're like, well, you haven't shown me anything. And I'm like, calm down, it's okay.
Why weren't you at the table read?
That was the first thing that I was thinking of when you said that, because from making that kind of art, creating this music, of course you need that inspiration of seeing the show. But on the other side, from the production standpoint, that feels late in the game. Adding the most, one of, you could arguably, like we said earlier, with as far as the movies, the most critical, crucial element of the show.
Sure, I know, it's so weird how backwards we do things in some ways, but it's like, I mean, like I said, it's the same with film. It's like, how did Spielberg know that John Williams would rescue Jaws and make it amazing? You know, how did he know? How did he would have to trust the musician so implicitly and so absolutely to be like, hey, here's my film that makes no sense, make it make sense, you know? And for me as a musician, yeah, it's like that as well. It's like, I'm always nervous when I work with new directors for like a big theater project, because it's like, okay, they're, you know, have you got anything for me yet? Like, I really need to see something that fits into the scene. And I'm like, I cannot tell you how my music is going to sound until I see how long it takes for this person to walk from here to here. And, you know, whether I might create something and it's going to be too over the top, you need it to be more subtle, or vice versa. And I don't know that until I see it on the stage. And sometimes I don't even know it until I see it with lights. So that's like the other aspect that's like, you know, like I'm not a lighting person.
And the lighting guy is like, I can't do it till I hear the sound.
Which is why tech is so often the sound, you know, the sound person and the lighting person next to each other going like, you know, okay, this is how this is going to work. You know, how long is your fade? How long is your fade? Let's put our heads together and figure this out and then do it jointly. It's very difficult to sort of work in a vacuum and then just have tracks and be like, this is how it is. You know, that's not how this art form is created.
You know, it's just like, you know, it's I hear such a comparison to building puppets for some stage stuff. I worked on a show and, you know, they needed a whole bunch of puppets for it, and this one bigger puppet. I don't want to be too specific because some people will know. But, you know, and I built the smaller ones where it was one per person, and then there was a bigger one that obviously needed to have multiple people on it. And I was watching them. I was like, well, can I see what you're planning for that scene with the bigger puppet? And they're like, well, I don't know yet because I don't have the puppet. And I was like, ooh, it's sassy.
Oh my.
I was like, well, I don't know what to build yet. Like, I don't even know how many people you're going to have on it. I need to see what kind of movements you want to do. Is this thing going to go all the way across the stage? Or does it just kind of sit there? I'm like, all that affects how I'm going to be building it. Because it wasn't like the traditional type of puppets that I do.
Yeah. It's like, how much space does it need to fill on the stage?
Exactly.
What is its proportion to the other actors on the stage or the other characters on the stage? Yeah, it's like all of this stuff needs to come together. And it's sort of crazy what we do, right? It's like, it's like, it's amazing, but it's also slightly insane that we bring all these aspects together in this huge collaborative project, and it almost always comes together at the end. You coordinate, you know, these different disciplines and create a thing that people want to come and see.
Totally. Now, I don't know if you guys know who your musicians are going to be yet for this upcoming summer, but certainly, you know, for any musicians who are out there and listening to this, do you have any tips for musicians who want to work with puppeteers, or you know, think that they're going to have to work with puppeteers, about what they should learn about puppetry before they kind of dive into it?
Yes. I mean, I got lucky because I have a theater background as well. So I feel like musicians, and it's something that everybody has a sense of, but learning about how to create narrative. I know we talked about how puppetry doesn't have to be narrative, but most puppetry has a narrative perspective. Learning how music creates narrative, I think, is really important to being a theater composer. Did you want to say?
Yeah, I was going to add to that. Being a little more initiative driven. I think sometimes we see folks who come in who are used to performing other people's music. They tend to have a compositional background, but they'll write it for other people to perform. I think in the scale of puppetry, oftentimes you're looking for people who not only create the music but also perform the music, and are driving as well as being in the passenger seat. Like, it's the ability to be flexible and to relax, but also to stick your hand up and take a little control too.
Yeah, to be an active participant.
Yeah, sounds easy, right?
It can be intimidating, especially working with people that you never worked with before. And I mean, for me, okay, I will also say, when you said be flexible, this is something I think for all musicians everywhere, actually. We've gotten to this weird thing where people love specializing really exactly on like one particular style of music. I guess this happens in a lot of different art forms. But to me, as a musician, you should be open to just about anything. You should never close yourself off to, a particular genre of music or a particular style of music. It's not to say you're going to be an expert in every kind of music, but learning, how hip-hop music works and learning to appreciate it and, the style and structure of hip-hop is an amazing skill for any musician living in America to know, actually the whole world, because hip hop is like amazingly pervasive, So it's like my heart falls a little bit when I hear from musicians who come in that, I've never listened to country music, I hate it. You know what I mean? Or I've never listened to this style of music, I hate it. It's not really my thing. I'm like, music is our thing, and every kind of music will teach you something, about a culture or about a style or about rhythm or about whatever it is, and being as broad as possible and as open-minded as possible in what you're willing to try and experiment with will help you as a musician. And like I said, and will also show what you have to bring to the table as someone who doesn't specialize in that particular style. It's like within the classical music world, the version of that is like when you're in your bachelor's program, sometimes you're encouraged to like play another instrument just to learn how another instrument operates a little bit, especially if you're a music ed, you're encouraged to like learn one of each type of instrument to sort of experiment. And they do that in music ed to teach, so that you can teach that instrument when you go out into the teaching world. But I'm like, as a composition major, I was like, please sign me up for that as well, because I'd love to know how the bassoon works and how bassoon music sounds and, what's different about playing the bassoon as opposed to like playing a string instrument or playing the piano. And it just expands your idea of how to be expressive and all of those kinds of things. So yeah, my number one advice for musicians working actually in any theater context, but particularly with puppeteers, is all of that amazing training that you have on a particular style or a particular instrument, keep it, but don't rely on it. Be prepared to do all kinds of crazy stuff. Make noise. Think about John Cage. Think about, pop styles that you're not comfortable sometimes working in. And the same thing with pop musicians, who are interested in this kind of thing. You don't have to always sound like your exact true self, because as musicians, we, like actors, can try on different voices and try on different characters. It's just like acting. It's just with a musical language instead of with words.
Well, from the same end, flipping it, I can imagine some puppeteers listening to this right now and thinking, like, I'm struggling to finance my puppet show alone. Like, what is there any advice you could give to them? Maybe someone on a budget, the best way to connect with a musician or work out some kind of arrangement that would be maybe less risky for them, maybe financially?
Yeah. I mean, you want to talk about Feston?
Socialize. That's what it boils down to. I know
puppetry
go
can go
to shows.
Yeah.
Like go there and there are free shows you can go to. There are no shortage of musicians. And the only way you're gonna find folks out there who are potentially interested in this is go see their art, and hang out after the show and talk to them. Mm-hmm. And when you tell them that, oh yeah, by the way, I'm involved in puppetry, you guys know that always brings an interested reaction, and it gets you out. It gets you seeing these things, and you can develop friendships with strangers.
This is just a therapy session on how to be less socially anxious. Which
Again,
I
computer
think,
nerd here. I'm speaking from my own. Like this is, and even coming from being in bands. Like, how do you find bands you play with?
Yeah.
Like, go see them, see what they do. You can gauge their personality.
The easiest place to do this. And so I also teach at Rutgers University. I have a bunch of, freshmen and undergrads that I teach composition to. And I swear, like, half my teaching is teaching those students how to reach out to other people and how to collaborate. Like, literally, I sit them down sometimes and I'm like, okay, well, you've written your composition. Now let me teach you how to write an email that introduces yourself to performers. Literally, and then I'm like, let's sit down, and because I'll be like, did you email that person? They're like, no. And you can see the anxiety because it's scary to put yourself out there and to ask someone to collaborate with you. And I'm like, look, you have nothing to lose. Sit down here next to me, and I will help you write an email that, presents yourself to someone you've never met, to see if they want to maybe meet with you or collaborate with you, or if they know someone else who is available to do that, if they're not available to do that. And I will say, school in particular, if you have the advantage of being in a university environment, is the number one place to make those connections and to do that. You have almost every school has an entire department where there are people who play instruments and do music. If you make up little flyers and put them on notice boards and say, puppeteer interested in collaborating with a musician, you will get people who will email you or text you or whatever. Reach out to professors even and say, hi, I'm really interested in this. Do you have any composition students who might be interested in collaborating with me or looking for a new project? As someone who works within a university right now, if I got one of those emails, I would absolutely know which of my students to direct you to. The
sooner you start, the better the chance is that you'll develop this relationship, like a professional working relationship with another artist. I often think about the director-composer pairs that are out there. You've got Tim Burton and Danny Elfman. They've been working together forever.
Mm-hmm. Or J.J. Abrams and who's it? Michael? I can't say his name.
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about. Yeah.
Right.
And Darren Aronofsky and Clint Mansell.
Yes.
Like you have these pairs that they find out, and sometimes they were just in school together, and they were just doing things because they're creative people who want to do something together rather than a hired gun.
Well, and one thing I added to that too, because I could hear someone saying, "Oh, I'll just email people," and they send emails. I said, please, I sent the email, but people aren't doing it. They must be mean or something, But another thing I might add to that too is like, how can you add value to, giving something back as well, making it a little bit of an exchange as much as you can with what you have.
Well, and I think I saw a Decemberist show a couple years ago, and their final song, I don't even remember what it was, but they brought out this gigantic whale puppet. and it was the whole band performing it. But if you could say, if you do a score for my movie, we'll come out and do live puppetry to have this synesthetic experience at your next live show or something like that.
Absolutely.
And try to find ways to collaborate in that way where it's not that you're just taking from them. If you can't give back financially, you could, trade services or things.
Right. Yes. As a composer, I've totally done that for, performers. Sometimes I'll get a performer who is like, I really want to commission something from you, but I have no budget. And I'll say, listen, if I can hire you to record a bunch of my other pieces, then I will write this for you for free and we'll just do a trade swap. And then, Uncle Sam doesn't take a cut of it or anything. It's just like a literal services swap. But I also want to say, first of all, don't mass email people. Don't just, create a MailChimp.
That's what I was trying to get away from thinking.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't mass email people with like, hi, I am this person. Please get back to me. Make sure that you get to know who you're emailing through Google or their website or, however it is. If you have a contact in common, ask them about them. Ask them, if they can help you approach that person. But also, don't be offended or down on yourself if they say no, because they might be super busy or it might not be the right thing for them at this time. And no contact is wasted. You will learn something from every contact that you make. Either you will learn that this is not an avenue that you can take with this person, which is a good thing to know. Okay, great. I'll move on to something else. Or you make contact with someone, this project doesn't work out, but maybe somewhere down the line, suddenly you get a phone call and they would love to work with you on another project. Like there have been so many things where I've, reached out to some dream company that I want to work with. And they're like, no, we're like super busy. We're not going to get back to you. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And then 6 months later, they're like, oh, can we work with you? Can we have a meeting with you? Actually, we have an opening suddenly and I really want to talk with you about collaborating with you on a show. So yeah, like just if you present yourself, in a friendly way, in a professional way, and don't take it hard if it doesn't happen.
It's part of the process. You eat food every day, right? Sometimes it's awesome. Sometimes it ends poorly.
You learn something about yourself.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that, you can't edit a blank page. You're going to get rejections. It's not because of you. It's just the nature of things.
Sometimes it is because of you, though.
Sometimes.
But honestly, it's tough love. Sometimes you do got to look in the mirror. Am I approaching this wrong? Because I even know how many emails I get. This one lady. I remember she met. Can you make me a puppet? I'm like, what's your budget? No. Can you make it for free? I was like, I'm sorry, I just can't. I don't have the time. But she's like, but I can't do it. I was like, well, I'm sorry, I can't either. I don't have the time. She's like, but you don't understand. I work full time. I can't do it. I was like, I work full time too, and do this on the time. Like something you gotta.
Yeah. I mean, and I've had that experience where I've had people be like, I want you to write some music for me for free because it's a good cause, and and I will just say, I'm really sorry. I'm at a point in my career where I don't work for free. I have commissions out the wazoo and, they're all paid commissions and I don't have the time to accept free commissions. Again, it's not necessarily a wasted contact because I sort of, for me, when people approach things like that, I mean, unless they're just like so completely clueless that I'm like, why are you continuing to talk to me? Then I just start ignoring them, fine, block that person. It's fine. But for me, sometimes you reach out to those people reach out to me and I'll say, you know what, maybe in the future when you do have a project with a budget, great. Oh, one more thing I wanted to say. If you have absolutely no budget and but you have a lot of time, figure out how to make some music yourself. Music is for everyone as well. You know what I mean? It's kind of...
You've got incredible free tools on... We all have smartphones at this point.
Yeah.
I would imagine most people have a computer. And you can get free tools. I fell down this path because in 1996 there was free software that I could use to make CD quality music. And
Matt is not a trained musician. Matt does not know how to read music. I've been trying to get him to read music for a long time for very selfish reasons, because I need someone to help me proofread my scores. But it's a lot of work to learn how to read music. You have to practice it for a long time before you can do it, and he doesn't have time to do that. So you don't have to be a trained musician to create cool sounding music.
They're inexpensive tools you can use to bide your time, and also maybe learn a few things. But of course, you also don't want to stretch yourself too thin.
No, but you can also...
You might learn that you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
You might learn that I definitely need to hire somebody.
It's true. But I also sort of feel like, puppeteers are creative people, and, music doesn't have to be super complicated to work in a theatrical context. My advice to someone who is like, I really want some music for this thing, but I just can't afford to hire anyone, and I'm just starting out, so I don't have anything to offer anybody. I'm like, you know what? Get one of these little $50 synthesizers if your budget can stretch to something like that, or borrow a ukulele. Figure out how to play a couple chords on it and see if that works. You can use, now phones are able to record audio that is actually really impressively good. For it's not like it was 10 years ago. You can create really good audio from a recording on your phone. Use that as a backing track. Try and see how far you can get doing that kind of thing.
Right, that at least gets you out there, and it's not unusual for musicians who do get exposure to this to be like, oh, I could do better than that. And then reach out to you like, oh, that sounds really cool. Like, I love what you're doing, but how about that? Would you like to try something different? It's, ship it, get it out there, get it done.
There are some really good apps where you can create sort of generative music using the app as well.
That's true.
What's that one? Bloom? That's a
little ambient.
But if you're looking for that kind of music, there are some interesting sort of music making apps that you can find that that will create little things for you, and then you can record them as like MP3s and use that as well. As a musician, and I'm sure some musicians might be listening to me saying this and being like, Melissa, you're going to put us all out of a career. Robots are going to make music forever. Oh my God, it's the end of everything,
Yeah, you're helping the people that don't have money anyway, though.
I know, but then part of me is like, listen, did CG put actors out of a job? No. And CG, for all of the advances, you can still tell when something is CG as opposed to a real person. They're sort of two different
Actually, believe it or not, Cam's in CG right now.
Yeah.
I'm here live. He's at home sick, and
That's amazing. I thought there was a little weirdness in the mouth movements. I was watching.
Like the Henry Cavill mustache.
It's the uncanny valley.
Nice. So well, that's all just a way to say, like robot music, if you want to call it that, computer generated music, CGM. It has its place. I don't think it will ever replace musicians, but if you're looking for something to put in,
there are budget options.
Yeah, there are budget options for beginners, but then go collaborate with someone because it's so much more rewarding.
Before we wrap up with our normal kind of spiel, we did want to give you guys a chance to plug your podcast. The Boghouse, which is just it comes out on Monday mornings, and it's how I get to work on Mondays every day, or every week, because it's so nice just to hear you two talk with each other, but then it's also just a fascinating story about the Hannah Callowhill Stage and what you guys have been doing. So can you just talk about that?
Yeah. I actually have I have a flyer here for those watching on the thing.
It's going to be inverted.
Is it going to be inverted? Anyway, our tagline is, it's a podcast about the time Matt and Melissa Dunphy bought a magic theater from a pedophile, discovered treasure, and became accidental amateur archaeologists. And this is like the other side of our lives right now. So, I'm a professional composer and Matt is a professional solutions engineer, and but in 2015 we saw a magic theater for sale that had just shut down because the owner went to jail. This is like a rhyme. I could turn this into a song, and a theme song. And then it's a long saga, but we tell it in the podcast with all of the gory details, and there are some details. We bought the place and we built an apartment on top for us to live in. And during the construction process on the apartment, we uncovered 2 privies from the 1700s stuffed with artifacts from the era of the Revolutionary War. It turns out those artifacts are actually very historically important and significant. So now we're in touch with the National Park Service and archaeologists up and down the East Coast. I have to tell you, like this coming June, I'm going to the Eugene O'Neill National Puppetry Conference. And then 3 days later, I'm going to an archaeology conference in upstate New York. And then 1 week after that, I'm going to a choral conference here in Philadelphia. So choral music conference here in Philadelphia. And in between 2 of those conferences, I've just been invited to an electronic music conference in New York City. And I'm like, oh, wow, June is a perfect encapsulation of my life right now, where I'm bouncing between all of these crazy things.
5 different disciplines.
Yeah, but the podcast has been going really well. You can go to boghouse.thehannah.org.
Or just search for The Boghouse wherever you look for podcasts.
Yeah,
Apple on Podcasts. The top 200 in iTunes in the art section.
It is. It's very exciting. And we were on ABC News, and in particular an ABC show called Localish, which you can check out online, where they came to our house and they brought drone cameras and did flybys of our building. And then they came upstairs and looked at all of our incredible artifacts.
It's a good 3-minute intro to the story, I think.
Yeah. But right now we're diving into history. The upcoming episode is focused on true crime in the 19th century, around and in our property. And it's exciting. I love talking about murder.
You guys are
hot right now.
Such goths.
I know, it's my cultural roots.
That's the most goth podcast I've ever heard.
Totally, bones and murders and digging in the ground and poop. I mean, that last part not so much, but very cool.
You guys, you'll have to eventually come to the O'Neill as actual guest artists to do a puppet show about the whole experience in the history of the theaters.
Oh, we could totally do that.
There are stories to tell.
Oh yeah, I feel like I've already. I had a theater artist from Pig Iron Theater Company, which is here in Philadelphia, very movement-based experimental theater company, who came and took some pictures of the archaeological dig, and then we just sort of randomly started doing object puppetry with the animal bones that I was finding in and around the dig, and I was like, okay, this is gonna be a show one day, clearly.
Wonderful.
Yay.
Well, you got a good way to find some collaborators for it.
Oh yeah. And when we finish the theater, because we are going to reopen it as a venue eventually, 50 to 70 seat venue, 15 by 15 foot stage for all of those puppeteers out there who are interested in touring to Philadelphia sometime after the end of 2020. Please look up the Hannah Callowhill Stage. We would love to host you. We have artist housing on site in a lovely little Airbnb apartment. And
and our backstage will have a toilet.
And our backstage will have a toilet because we're building that soon. And but not
it's
with
filled with national treasure.
That's filled with national treasures that you can pee and poop on to your heart's content. Yes, very good.
Wonderful. Well, as we begin to wrap up, we'll ask you the final question that we ask all of our guests, in the spirit of Jim Krupa, who has obviously some really great stories about when things went wrong in the puppetry world for him and you wanted to pull your hair out in the moment, but looking back now with hindsight, you can kind of appreciate the puppeteer's moment of it. Do you guys have a good puppeteer story for yourself of either collaborating with the O'Neill or anything like that, where things didn't go right at the time, but now you get to enjoy it, enjoy the story?
Oh my gosh.
You cannot tell names if you.
Yes, I know. I'm like, oh no, everybody's going to definitely be listening to everything.
Or you could just throw Zeb right under the bus. So.
No, that was such an awesome project. have definitely had that I have a memory actually, and I don't remember who the puppeteer was because this was like slightly traumatic for me, where because you're in such a whirlwind of creation at the O'Neill, sometimes rehearsals towards the end of the project just go completely out the window, and because you're trying to hold 8 to 10 shows in your head, I have definitely had at least one moment where I've strode onto stage with my violin, ready to play with a puppet show, and started playing, and then I look and it's the wrong show. And I'm like, oh, now I'm sad. Now I'm playing sad music. And you can see the puppeteer like behind, their shadow screen or whatever it is, with like steam coming out of their ears because I'm like ruining their show. And I'm like, no. And then,
they're like, this isn't the time for Jim Rose's hokey pokey.
Yeah. You're really selling that MIDI box right now, too.
Yeah.
Oh, I did have a good one.
What's
yeah.
yours?
Let's hear it.
We were there was the UFO scene in something where we make a big splash. Everybody like does something big and loud with their instrument, and I thought for fun I would just like we had an acoustic guitar that year, so I just like raked across the strings, just cacophonous sound, and then later. One of the only times I've gone up on stage and solo played acoustic guitar, I get up on stage and it is completely out of tune.
From him hitting it earlier. I totally remember this.
Oh, no.
And it's just me and one other performer. It was one of these ones where I think it was from the writing track, maybe.
Yeah, it was supposed to be like a bucolic kind of river scene with Matt playing like pretty...
Dum, dum, dum. And it's just like...
Twang, 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 twang.
And like the second note I hit, like my face, I'm just like, oh no. But luckily there was this pace where it's like a little bit of music and then a stop. And like something happens. And so it's like, stop the music, tune, 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 tune. And then play it, and it's still not there yet. And it was okay. Like it came together, but that was definitely like, okay. And even like at the time it was, I couldn't figure out what happened. I didn't put it together that I had made that happen by what I had done earlier. It was just, I picked up the guitar and was like, I swear this was in tune.
Whose guitar is this? Somebody.
Who put poop in my pants?
And fortunately, puppeteers don't know enough about music, so no one knew the difference.
Yeah.
I brought it up. I was like, I'm so sorry, and she was like, I didn't even notice. I was so nervous up there.
Right. And like I can't count the number of times, as a musician, not even just working with puppeteers, but just like in general that, well, here's one, real quick one from my composition world. I wrote this solo piano piece once. This might be the reason I haven't written another one. I wrote this solo piano piece, and it's pretty difficult, and I gave it to a Curtis student to perform at my when I was getting my doctorate for a college performance, and they didn't really practice it all that well, and so they got to the performance, and they were playing my piece. But here's the thing, it's a brand new piece, so nobody knew how it was supposed to go. I'm in the audience dying because it's completely different from what I thought was on the page or what I had in my head. I'm like, you can feel like the redness creeping up because you're just so embarrassed and so horrified by the whole thing. Anyway, cut to the next semester. I switch composition teachers because they switch you every semester. And I have this new composition teacher, and she's like, oh, I went to that concert. I really like your piano piece. She's like, I thought it was really cool. It was really good. And I'm just there going, oh, well, thank you.
The forgiving nature of live theater.
Yeah, it reminds me of a showbiz thing. It's like, if you're going to make a mistake, make it big. It's like,
yes!
Wow, how bold and brave they are to play a guitar out of tune.
Right,
it was like her life was coming together.
Right.
What an artist! Yeah. Like it's a metaphor.
Yeah, the guitarist deliberately did scordatura at the beginning of the show, and that's amazing. And then gradually just like brought it to like traditional tuning. It was incredible. I didn't know you could do that.
Just run with it.
Yeah, I like the way the arm rod of the puppet fell off halfway through the show.
Yes,
and it symbolizes how the character's life is falling apart too.
Yeah. All the strings of the marionette completely tangled up, but it was like the marionette was like going through a real tough time, and like it was a really great metaphor for what it's like to have depression and anxiety. Actually, yeah. Anyway,
and Voltaire came out and with his eyeshadow and.
That's right. Let's goth it up.
Guy liner.
So what's the best way for people to follow your things you're working on and projects?
If you can follow the Boghouse on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, we're the Boghouse on Twitter, one word, or on Facebook, the Boghouse Podcast, same on Instagram. I'm also on Twitter on all of those things as myself, Melissa. My handle is Mormalike, but if you just Google Melissa Dunphy, I'm usually the first thing that comes up. I'm like a SEO person that does really good Google searches. Matt,
I've been online under the same handle since like 1996. It's Leviathan, which is Leviathan with a T at the end of it, because if I didn't put a T at the end of it, AOL added a bunch of numbers to it. So it became this unique identifier, and you can find me on all the social and music things under that handle.
Well, Matt and Melissa Dunphy, thank you so much for coming on Puppeteers. It was so good to catch up with you, and really illuminated the world of music composition and sound for us. So
yay! Well, it's so good to see you two as well, and to talk with you, and hopefully we'll see you at the conference. All right, thank you so much. We had a blast.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thanks.